We are looking out here from the south coast of Cornwall to an area that has several rough ground marks. One of those marks is well known, but it is a mark I have never managed to fish, mainly because weather conditions and my availability have not coincided. But I am determined to fish this mark this season. The mark is known as Lath Rock, also pronounced Lath Rock. It's a submerged reef. In other words, it does not expose on the lowest low water tides. However, on the biggest spring tides, the highest point of the rock only sits about 7 feet under the surface. Because it does not expose, I need to be able to find it, and this is where a GPS with marine charts is really useful. If it's listed on my marine charts, or if I can get the GPS coordinates for the mark, I can set a waypoint that will guide me. Before I set out to fish the mark, let's have a look at setting a waypoint. We're looking at my marine navigation charts. That's the charts I have on my handheld GPS when I'm out on the kayak, but we're looking at it on my computer. I'm able to do that because installed on the computer I have the Garmin HomePort software, and by plugging in my GPS to the computer via the USB lead, I can view the charts, which is really useful when you want to set waypoints at home or you're just looking for new marks to fish. Now I'm fortunate that on these marine charts Lath Rock shows, and it's this area here in blue, and the reason it shows is because it becomes so shallow on the big spring tides, and you've got this dotted line here which is a recommended route for shipping to try to avoid the rock. So if it didn't show on the charts, I'll probably have to get the coordinates from someone, or maybe from a dive site, because Lath Rock is also a dive site. So it's really useful that I don't need to do that. I can just use the chart and create a waypoint. Now I've got two options of launch sites. I can launch from this area here, which is a beach known as Port Holland, which is a launch site that I often launch from when I want to fish in the bay here. Or I can launch from the old fishing village of Portlow. Now the distance from Port Holland to Lath Rock is about 1.6 miles, and the distance from Portlow is just over a mile. So it seems to make sense to me to launch from Portlow, to cut down on paddling time, and also if I'm out there and I need to get back in quickly, if the weather turns a bit sour, I can get back to my launch site at Portlow quicker than I can get back to my launch site if I was to launch from Port Holland. So all I need to do is create my waypoint, and to do that I just need to put my pointer onto Lath Rock and just right click and create new waypoint, and it automatically names it Lath Rock because it's listed on the chart as Lath Rock, so I don't need to name it. But what I'm also going to do, I'm going to create a waypoint at my launch site, and we're just going to name that Portlow Launch. Okay, so there I've got my two waypoints created. So what I'm going to do now is get down to Portlow to do some fishing. I'm going to be fishing on Bank Holiday Monday, the Easter Bank Holiday Monday, and the forecast looks really good. There's a bit of an easterly wind, so that it might be a bit of a swell, and whenever you get easterly on the south coast of Cornwall, even if it's light winds, if it's combined with a spring tide or it's wind against tide, it's surprising. It doesn't take much to kick up quite a big swell. So I'm expecting a bit of a chop, but it should be perfectly okay. The forecast is good with light winds. It should be perfectly okay, apart from a bit of a swell for fishing. So I'm going to get down there, and when I get out just outside the entrance of the harbour of Portlow, we'll have a look at bringing up the waypoints on my handheld GPS and actually setting a track out to the rock that I can follow. Now you may think, well, if you can see Lath Rock listed on your marine charts, why bother creating a waypoint? Well, we're looking at here on a big screen, but of course the screen on my handheld GPS is very, very small. And at my launch site, and probably for quite a distance paddling out, I would not be able to see Lath Rock, even if I minimised it right down. So that's why I'm going to create a track to follow using the waypoints out to the rock, so I know that I'm going to stay on a true course to the rock. Right, so we'll get down there, and as I said, when I get out, we'll have a look at creating the track, creating the route to follow out to the rock. When I'm actually out there fishing, even though I've never fished it before, what I expect to catch, being it's a rough ground mark and being this time of year, what I mainly expect to catch is pollock. I'm hoping to pick up some big pollock. I'm also hoping to pick up a codlin, 1 or 2 codlin, or even a decent sized cod if there's any around. So that's what I'll be fishing for. And also, when I get out there, we'll have a look at the tackle I'm going to be used to target these pollock and cod. The wonderful old Cornish coastal village of Portlow was once a thriving fishing village, particularly during the height of the pilchard industry. There was once many day boats operating out of Portlow, but unfortunately today there are only 2 full-time fishermen left who mainly target crabs and lobsters. If you go into the church next to the harbour that was once the lifeboat station, there are some wonderful old photos, some going back to the early 1900s, that show the days when fishing was the main source of income for the local inhabitants. To launch a kayak or boat, you have to put your £5 launch fee into the box provided with your name and address, and to me it is well worth it to cut down on the paddling distance to the mark I want to fish and to support the harbour. Okay, now I'm out of the harbour. What I'm going to do is set my waypoint to Lath Rock. Now I'll just go into the menu, into my waypoint manager, and then I just scrolled it. Just see Lath Rock there, hope you can see it, and then we're just going to enter and then just tell it to go to, and what that will do, that will set a track for me to follow, and that's going to be a lot easier for me than trying to do it by the map, because like I said earlier, with only a small screen, even if I minimise this down to the smallest possible, I'm unlikely to see where Lath Rock is, where the reef is from my launch site here at Portlow. Right, so we're just going to follow that track now. Got about just over a mile to paddle. It's a little bit lumpy out here, but it should be fine. Just have a slow, steady paddle, and we'll have a look at the reef on the fish finder when I get out there. I'm not far off the shallowest part of the reef now, and this is where I'll find out if my marine charts are accurate. I'm starting to see a bit of rough ground on the fish finder, But what I'm expecting to see is a rise as I approach the shallower part from, I'm in 66 foot of water at the moment, and I'm expecting to see the ground rise. Yeah, sure enough, it's getting more and more jagged down the bottom now. I mean, I'm nowhere near low water. There's still going to be a lot of water over the reef, so it's still quite a lot of water over it. Yeah, it's right. It's rising up a lot more now as I go further over the shallow part. As you can see there, the ground is starting to become very jagged down the bottom, and the further I went over the shallower part, the more it started rising up. I paused the fish finder there and rewound it just to show you. Still a lot of water over the shallow part, but like I said, I'm several hours before low water, and although it's a spring tide, it's not a big spring tide, so there'll still be, at low water, there'll still be plenty of water over the reef. And what I'm going to do today, you can see on the GPS there where I am, right over that shallow part, almost right to my waypoint on Lath Rock. But what I'm going to do now is just pause for a while and find out, using the GPS there, find out which way I'm drifted. I hope this is not too shaky, this camera. It's a little bit of a chop today, and it's a little bit difficult holding this steady, the camera, but hopefully it's not too shaky. So I'm just pausing to see which way I'm drifting, and when I know which way I'm drifting, I can paddle away and then drift over the areas I fish. But basically I'm just going to, as I've never fished this before, I'm just going to drift just in the general area. If I minimize that down, the general area that we looked at earlier, from the shallower part down into the deepest part. Okay, I can see now which way I'm drifting, so I'll paddle in the opposite direction and then set up my first drift, and hopefully we'll pick up at least a few fish to make the trip worthwhile. See the brilliant Cornish coastline there. We've got the Dodman Point out there, magnificent sight, really high point. If you ever come down here and you want to go for a walk, have a walk out to Dodman Point. The views are absolutely spectacular. I think it stands about 200 feet up. And we're looking along there. You've got across there, we've got Port Holland, which is a launch site I launched from a great deal. But like I said, that's quite a paddle out to here, so I decided to go from Port Low, which is across there. Fantastic sight. Right, I'm ready to start my first drift. I've just paddled a bit so I can get a reasonable drift, and just going to deploy the drift chute, which is, to me, is an absolute must, particularly when there's a bit of a swell or a bit of a breeze. There's no breeze today, but there's a bit of a swell, and what that's going to do, as I've said in several previous videos, of deploying the drift chute, that's going to turn my bow into this swell here, rather than being broadside on, and it's going to, apart from the fact that it's going to slow me down, it's going to make it much more comfortable for me to fish. Right, so we go down, and there's something showing down there, whether they're just little pollock or not, but that's what I'm expecting to catch, pollock, and maybe hopefully pick up a cod if there's any cod around. It didn't take long at all before I'm hit now with something. I don't think it's a cod. It's coming in too steady. It could of course be wrasse, which I don't really want to catch wrasse today, and it is wrasse. The only slight problem with wrasse is that they don't take too well to being hauled up from a depth, and I don't really particularly want to take it So I'm just hoping I can nice ballon wrasse there. Just hoping I can get this will go back okay. Yeah, it is. Many times with wrasse, like I said, they don't take being hauled up through the depths very well, and often you know you can't get them back. They'll just float on the surface, which is a bit. I mean, occasionally I take wrasse for the dinner table. They are actually okay to eat. Usually have them in fish cakes or a fish pie, and they're absolutely fine to eat. But if I do take them, I only take 1 or 2 each year. Have a look at the tackle I'm using. I've got 3 rods set up, and I'm fishing. It's all lure fishing today. And because this is rough ground, what I've got basically it's a drop shot rig. Only the difference between it being with a normal drop shot rig, instead of having the weight at the end, I've got a lure. It's a weedless lure. This happens to be a Sidewinder Weedless Minnow. But on the drop shot, got the hook tied on there with the usual drop shot knot, so it stands off nicely. On this particular setup, I've got a Slug-Go, a 6-inch Slug-Go, which I find work really well for pollock and cod. I've got the same setup on the other 2 rods, one with slightly bigger lures in case I need them. But the other reason for having the 3 rods set up, because it's rough ground, if I do lose tackle, then I can, instead of messing around having to set up again, I can just pick up another rod and carry on fishing, particularly if the fishing's the particular spot I'm drifting over is good. So that's the rig. Basically, it's fairly light tackle. These are only 8 foot 15 to 50 gram rods. It's basically the same on the other rod. I've got a 20-pound braid and 15-pound fluorocarbon leader, and then on the trace it's just 30-pound fluorocarbon. Right, we'll get back down again. I think we're into either a pollock or feels like by the dives there, it feels like a pollock that I've hooked into here. I may be wrong. Usually if it's cod you get more head banging, where the pollock tend to dive. With wrasse, apart from an initial dive, you just get like just a steady, yeah, fairly reasonable inshore pollock here. Not a big pollock, but a decent size. Quite a nice little pollock there. It's taken on that took the weedless Sidewinder Weedless Minnow. Weedless is for these areas, these rough ground areas. Fishing weedless is a really good idea. Otherwise you just end up with losing too much tackle. And all I've got to do there is just reset the hook, and away we go again. Got plenty of spare towels with me, just in case this gets a bit bashed up, or you get maybe just the paddle end just bitten off there. So plenty of spare towels in case that happens. So that's great. That's what I expected to catch up here, with the possibility of maybe cod. So that's good. But so what we're looking for is hopefully a few more of these, or some really good sized ones. Well, I'm into something that feels pretty decent here. Oh no! Unfortunately, it's taken me into the reef, and all I can do really is slacken right off and hope that it swims out. I lost the fish, but I managed to get the tackle back. Unfortunately, that's what can happen. You hook a decent fish if it's a really good sized pollock. If you can't stop it taking you back down into the rough ground, you get it snagged. But fortunately, I managed to slacken right off and get the tackle back, but lost the fish. But never mind. It just shows there's some decent fish, size fish down there, so that's encouraging. So we'll just keep trying. Again, it feels like a good fish. And this one, I think, yeah, this one I've managed to get clear of the rough ground before it could dive back down into it. I just had to tighten the drag a little bit to stop it taking too much line and getting down into those rocks again. At least I'm hoping it's a pollock, and hoping really that it's not a good size, a big wrasse. Yeah, she's coming up now. Yeah, it's a pretty decent pollock, I'm pleased to say. Here it comes. Yeah, it's a nice fish. Just weighing that one, and it weighs about just under 6.5 pounds, so that's quite a nice pollock for inshore reef fishing. So that's really pleasing, and I think there's some big ones down there. Having lost that first one, I think there's probably a few quite a bit bigger than this down there. Just been joined here by a couple of fishermen in a great little boat there. Have also been doing similar to me, just doing a bit of drifting. Had a few. Is that cod or pollock? Yeah, got a nice cod in there. And I gather you know the YouTube channel then, because you said you Cornish fishermen.
Well, we've been on. Yeah, I've been on it, and then I told Ollie.
Yeah.
Some of your stuff's quite interesting.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
No, I'm glad you enjoy it.
Especially your Kayak road stuff.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting to see what's in the Kayak road. Really.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
You get most things.
To be honest, it's a great resource there, because there's hardly any commercial fishing goes on there.
Right.
I mean, there's a bit of prawn potting that goes on, but there's no trawling. There's a bit of ring netting for the mullet.
Well, they've been ring netting up in the creeks for
Yeah.
bream as well, haven't
Yeah. Well,
they? Apparently.
that's the problem.
Yeah. That's the trouble with posting it all, you see.
Yeah.
The commercial boys have a look at it and then the
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Still, nice to talk to you.
Yeah, see you again on
Yeah, all the best.
Road of Cornwall.
Yeah, I'm just going to fish a couple of hours of the flood tide and then head on in.
Well, we'll probably go in about 4 when the tide's a bit higher.
Okay. Nice to talk to you. Yeah, all the best. Cheers. Bye. The method I'm using here with these weedless lures is two methods. One is lower it down to the bottom and then just give it a few jigs just to see if there's any cod sitting down the bottom. But if you don't get a take then the usual way of fishing for pollock is just a slow and steady retrieve, so many feet off the bottom, and that's how I got that pollock I just caught to take. But often I find with the cod, if you just jig it down the bottom or just slightly off the bottom, they'll take it. Pollock will take it that way as well, but if you can't get the pollock to take that way, then just a gentle retrieve up from the bottom and get that paddle tail working on the lure, and now of course the pollock will swim up and take it. And then the great fun with pollock fishing, they'll come up maybe right up to say mid-water and take the lure, and then you got that fantastic dive, the initial dive you get with pollock when they try to get back down again to the rough ground. So those are the two methods I'm using. Caught a few pollock and my Slug-Go on the drop shot hook. It's got a bit beaten up, so I'm just going to pop a new one on. Pretty straightforward to do if you've never done it before. It's just push the point of the hook through the nose until you get to the first bend there, then come up through the center of the belly and then just push it down, and when you get on this little kinked bit here, it's just sort of turn it so that the hook can come from underneath. And on these Slug-Gos, there's marks here of where you can sort of push the hook through. So coming up from the underside of the belly, all I then need to do is push it straight through and try and get it where it comes out the center of the top of the lure. Like that, and as long as it sits nice and straight like that, that's fine. I mean, you can just clip the hook through the nose there, but because this is such rough ground, I want to fish weedless to try and avoid snags. Nearly time for me to call it a day now. Now, one other great thing about the GPS, of course, is for safety reasons. Now, on my return trip, you can clearly see the Portloe, the fishing village of Portloe there. So I don't need it. I mean, I needed the GPS to come out to Lath Rock because I can't see it. But I can obviously clearly see Portloe, and therefore I know where I'm going. However, if it was foggy, then I have a bit of a problem. I mean, I've got a compass on board, which is a backup, which of course I know that if I head north, I'm going to hit land. But that's not going to take me straight back to my location. So there's another great thing about the GPS. I've set because I've got the waypoint of my launch site, if the fog was to roll in, all I would have to do is do exactly the same as I did when I set out today, is just go to the waypoint for my Portloe launch and then just tell it to go to that, and even in thick fog I can follow that track and get right back to base. So if you haven't got a GPS, I thoroughly recommend getting one, particularly one with marine charts. They really are useful, not only for going to new marks that maybe someone gives you the coordinates for, but just in general to mark your waypoints, to know where you are. And of course, and when you're drifting, like I've been drifting today over and around the rock, I know exactly where I am, and I can see, if I see shoals of fish where the pollock are sitting, I can obviously see where they are, and I can note that and try and set the drift up to go over that point and take advantage of that. Whereas if I was just drifting over blind, it wouldn't be so good. So the combination of the GPS and the fish finder are great assets for the kayak. So we're going to make our way back to Portloe, just over a mile away there. Absolutely fantastic scenery to go back to to paddle into this evening. It's been a great day. It's very early April over the Easter. It's Easter Monday, early April, but it's been really, really warm today. Been a bit of a swell at times, and I almost became seasick, but I took the tablet just in time, and that's cured it. So I was managing to finish the session. So I'm just going to fish for a short while longer, just at the early flood tide, and then head on in and have a couple of beers. So once again, I hope you found that useful, and many thanks for watching.